Arizona Territory, 1879. The sun spilled like molten gold across the desert horizon as Isaac Oakes squinted into the unforgiving distance. 3 days lost in the Sonoran Desert, and his canteen rattled with barely enough water to wet his parched throat. At 25, he'd driven cattle through the worst of Texas thunderstorms and survived a Comanche raid, but the merciless heat of this godforsaken wasteland was slowly stealing his resolve. "Steady, Brutus," he murmured to his exhausted Appaloosa. "We ain't dying today." Isaac adjusted his sweat-soaked hat, its once crisp brim now limp from the punishing sun. His rifle hung heavy against his saddle, useless against this invisible enemy called thirst. The cattle drive to Tucson should have been routine, just another job for another dollar. But a dust storm had separated him from the herd, and now he wandered, directionless, guided only by the vague certainty that civilization lay somewhere westward. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent years cultivating his solitude, preferring the company of cattle to men, and women least of all. A cowboy's got no business taking roots, his father had warned before a rustler's bullet widened the distance between them permanently. "The frontier'll take everything you love, son, best not to love at all." Isaac had embraced that creed, wearing his isolation like armor. When other cowhands visited saloon girls or spoke of sweethearts waiting back home, he'd simply tend to his horse or clean his gun. The West demanded a man stay unfettered, ready to move at dawn's first light. Attachment was a luxury he couldn't afford, not after watching his mother wither away from grief after his father's murder. A sudden movement on the horizon broke his reverie. Brutus whinnied, sensing his master's alertness. Isaac's hand instinctively moved to his Colt, though his vision blurred from dehydration. The silhouette solidified into a modest adobe structure, its walls the same dusty hue as the surrounding landscape. A homestead, impossibly isolated, with thin smoke rising from a chimney. "Water," Isaac croaked, digging his heels into Brutus's flanks. The horse seemed to gather its last reserves of strength, trotting toward the promise of salvation. As they drew closer, Isaac could make out a garden patch improbably green against the desert browns. A figure emerged from the house, rifle raised cautiously. Even in his desperate state, Isaac registered that something was different about this silhouette, softer, with a dress billowing slightly in the hot breeze. "That's far enough, stranger," the voice confirmed his suspicion, "a woman alone in this desolation." "Ma'am," he called back, his voice a rasp, "I don't mean no harm, just lost from my cattle drive. My horse and I need water, if you can spare it." The rifle didn't lower. "Dismount slowly and keep your hands where I can see them." Isaac complied, his legs nearly buckling as they hit the ground. He raised his hands, though the effort sent waves of dizziness through him. The world tilted, the adobe house suddenly rotating in his vision. "Sir, are you?" The ground rushed up to meet him, and darkness claimed Isaac before he could hear the rest. Cool water touched his lips, and Isaac sputtered back to consciousness. The blessed sensation of shade enveloped him, and for a moment he wondered if he'd died and somehow escaped the fires of hell he'd always assumed awaited him. "Drink slowly," instructed the voice from before, gentler now. "Too much too fast will make you sick." His vision cleared enough to reveal his savior. She couldn't have been more than 22, with hair the color of wheat fields at harvest, not blonde exactly, but a rich golden brown that caught the light filtering through the window shutters. Her eyes, a startling blue against sun-bronzed skin, studied him with concern mixed with lingering wariness. She wore a simple calico dress, practical for frontier life, but unable to hide the graceful lines of her figure. "Thank you, ma'am," Isaac managed after several small sips. "My name's Isaac Oakes. I was driving cattle to Tucson when a dust storm hit." "Sophia Blackburn," she replied, setting the ladle back into a bucket of water. "You're lucky you found this place. Not much else for 30 miles in any direction." Isaac tried to sit up, registering he was on a narrow cot in what appeared to be the main room of the homestead. His gun belt had been removed, he noted with a flicker of unease. "Your weapons are hanging by the door," Sophia said, following his gaze. "Your horse is watered and resting in the lean-to." "He's in better shape than you are." "What are you doing out here alone?" The question escaped before Isaac could consider its propriety. A shadow crossed her face. "Who says I'm alone?" Isaac glanced around the modest one-room structure. A curtain partitioned off what he assumed was a sleeping area. A small stove, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with preserved foods and a few books. Everything neat, everything sparse. And tellingly, everything silent. "My apologies," he said, though his instincts told him his observation was correct. "It's not my place to question." Sophia's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Rest now, Mr. Oakes. You can be on your way tomorrow if you're strong enough." But fate had other plans. By nightfall, Isaac's temperature soared, his body finally succumbing to the punishment it had endured. Delirious dreams plagued him, his father falling from his horse, blood blossoming across his chest, cattle stampeding toward a cliff edge. A woman's face, sometimes his mother's, sometimes a stranger's, watching him with disappointment. Through the fever, he was vaguely aware of cool cloths on his forehead, of bitter-tasting herbal remedies spooned between his lips, of a soft voice humming melodies that seemed to keep the worst nightmares at bay. Once he thought he felt fingers gently brushing hair from his face, but surely that was another fever dream. 3 days later, Isaac awoke clear-headed for the first time. The afternoon sun slanted through the window, catching dust motes in its golden beams. He was alone in the house, but the sound of chopping drew him to the window. Sophia was at work in her garden, her hair tied back with a faded ribbon, wielding a hoe with practiced efficiency. Isaac pulled on his shirt, noting it had been washed, and stepped outside. The desert heat hit him like a physical force after the relative coolness of the adobe interior. "You should be resting," Sophia said without turning. "I've imposed on your hospitality long enough," Isaac replied, though his legs felt unsteady beneath him. "I need to catch up with my outfit." Sophia finally turned, wiping sweat from her brow with her forearm. "Your outfit is likely in Tucson by now, Mr. Oakes. You've been fevered for 3 days." The news hit him harder than he expected. The trail boss wouldn't have waited, not with 2,000 head of cattle to deliver. No cowboy was worth delaying a drive. "I'm obliged to you for saving my life," he said stiffly. "I can pay you for your trouble before I go." "And where exactly will you go?" Sophia rested on her hoe, studying him with those penetrating blue eyes. "You're still weak as a newborn calf, your horse needs more rest, and the next town is 3 days' ride if you know the way, which you don't." Her practical assessment left no room for argument. Isaac's shoulders slumped slightly. "At least let me earn my keep while I'm here," he offered. A hint of a smile touched Sophia's lips. "There's always work on a homestead, Mr. Oakes. Can you mend a roof?" And so began an uneasy truce. Isaac's hands, calloused from years of rope work, turned to the tasks of homesteading. He patched the leaking roof, repaired the corral fence, and dug irrigation channels from Sophia's precious well to extend her garden. Each night, exhausted from work made harder by his recovering body, he slept on the cot while Sophia retired behind her curtained area. They spoke little at first, sharing meals in relative silence. Isaac learned that Sophia had been on the homestead for 2 years, arriving from Kansas with her husband, who had died from snakebite the previous summer. She had stayed because leaving meant admitting defeat, and the Blackburn stubbornness apparently ran deep. "Why do you remain a cowboy?" she asked one evening as they sat on the porch, the desert cooling rapidly after sunset. "Always moving, never settling." Isaac watched a shooting star trace across the vast darkness. "It's what I know. My pa was a cattleman before me." "That's not an answer," Sophia persisted. "That's just saying you never considered another way." Her directness unsettled him. Women in town were rarely so forthright, hiding thoughts behind fluttering fans or demure glances. "A man needs freedom," he said finally. "Can't have that tied to one patch of dirt." Sophia laughed, the sound startling in the quiet night. "Freedom? You follow cattle from one place to another, sleeping on the ground, eating dust, taking orders from a trail boss. How is that freedom?" The question lingered uncomfortably in Isaac's mind long after they'd retired for the night. His father's words echoed too: "The frontier'll take everything you love." But looking at Sophia's homestead, at what she'd built alone in this harsh land, he wondered if his father had been wrong. Maybe the frontier only took from those unwilling to fight for what mattered. A week stretched into 2. Isaac's strength returned, but still he found reasons to delay his departure. The well needed deepening. The stove chimney smoked too much. The garden expanded under their combined efforts, and Sophia showed him how her careful irrigation system made the desert bloom with vegetables and even a few flowers. "My mother always said beauty is necessary, even in hardship," she explained as she tended the bright zinnias bordering her garden. "Maybe especially in hardship." Isaac found himself watching her more than he should. The graceful efficiency of her movements, the tiny lines at the corners of her eyes that appeared when she smiled, the stubborn set of her jaw when she tackled a difficult task. Here was a woman carved from frontier grit, as tough as any cowhand he'd ridden with, yet undeniably feminine in ways that increasingly occupied his thoughts. One evening, as they finished their meal, a distant rumble interrupted their conversation. Sophia's expression transformed instantly, joy replacing her usual reserve. "Rain," she breathed, rushing outside. Isaac followed more slowly, skeptical. The sky indeed showed clouds gathering on the horizon, unusual for the season. Within an hour the storm arrived in earnest, sending sheets of water cascading from the heavens. Sophia stood in the downpour, face upturned, laughing like a child. "Come on," she called to Isaac, who remained sheltered under the porch overhang. "When was the last time you felt truly alive?" Something in her abandon broke through his carefully constructed walls. Isaac stepped into the rain, letting it soak through his shirt, plaster his hair to his forehead. Sophia grabbed his hands, pulling him into an impromptu dance around the yard, their boots splashing in rapidly forming puddles. "See," she said, her face radiant in the strange half-light of the storm. "The desert gives gifts if you're patient enough to wait for them." Isaac felt something shift inside him, like ground giving way beneath his feet. In that moment, with rain washing away the dust and heat, with Sophia's hands warm in his despite the downpour, he glimpsed a life he'd never allowed himself to imagine. One with roots, with connection, with something more sustaining than the transient camaraderie of the trail. The thought terrified him. The next morning, Isaac announced his departure. "I've stayed too long," he said over coffee, avoiding Sophia's eyes. "There'll be work in Tucson, maybe catch on with another outfit heading north." Sophia's face revealed nothing, though her knuckles whitened around her cup. "Of course, you've more than repaid any debt. Your horse is ready whenever you are." The businesslike tone of her response should have relieved him. Instead, it stung in ways Isaac hadn't anticipated. He'd expected, what, protests, tears. The very idea was foolish. Sophia Blackburn was no saloon girl to beg for attention, no tenderfoot to fear solitude. By mid-morning, Isaac had his few possessions packed and Brutus saddled. Sophia stood at the porch, arms crossed, her face composed in polite farewell. "I left some jerky and hardtack in your saddlebag," she said, "and filled your canteens. The trail to Tucson is marked on that map." "Thank you," Isaac replied, the words inadequate for all she'd done. He mounted Brutus, settling into the familiar comfort of the saddle. This was right, he told himself. This was the natural order of things. Cowboys moved on, never lingering too long in any place or with any person. "Good luck, mister." "Oaks," Sophia said, and the return to formality felt like a door closing between them. Isaac touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement, then turned Brutus toward the western horizon. He didn't look back as he rode away, though everything in him wanted to. 3 miles out, Isaac came across the tracks, fresh hoofprints of at least 6 horses, heading directly toward Sophia's homestead. He reined Brutus to a halt, studying the sign with growing unease. Few travelers passed through this desolate stretch, and these riders made no attempt to hide their approach. A memory surfaced, Sophia mentioning problems with a man named Decker who wanted her water rights. "Just talk so far," she'd said dismissively when Isaac pressed for details. "Nothing I can't handle." The tracks told a different story. 6 men didn't ride out for friendly conversation, especially not to a woman alone. Isaac hesitated only a moment before turning Brutus around. The Appaloosa seemed to understand the urgency, finding renewed energy as they galloped back toward the homestead. They arrived to find 5 horses hitched outside. Isaac dismounted at a distance, tethering Brutus behind a stand of mesquite, and approached on foot, his colt drawn. Voices carried from inside the house, a man's loud and threatening, followed by Sophia's, steady but strained. "The property's mine legally, Decker. I have the papers to prove it." "Papers don't mean much out here, Mrs. Blackburn. Your husband's dead. A woman can't work this claim alone. Be reasonable, take my offer, and go back east where you belong." Isaac reached the window, peering carefully around the edge. Sophia stood with her back to the stove, facing 4 men. The leader, a florid-faced man with an expensive vest straining across his substantial belly, gestured emphatically as he spoke. His companions were the typical sort, hard-faced gun hands positioned to block any escape. A 5th man must be outside, watching the horses. "I won't be leaving," Sophia replied, her chin raised defiantly. "Not today, not ever." Decker's expression darkened. "Have it your way, boys, burn it down. Let's see how attached she stays to ashes." One of the gunmen produced a bottle, presumably kerosene, and began dousing the furniture. Sophia lunged for her rifle, leaning against the wall, but another man caught her arm, twisting it behind her back. Isaac had seen enough. He moved to the doorway, cocked his revolver loudly enough to freeze everyone inside. "That's no way to treat a lady," he drawled, his gun trained steadily on Decker. "I suggest you boys reconsider your business here." Surprise registered on every face, including Sophia's. Her eyes widened, a complex mixture of emotion flashing across her features before settling into grim determination. "Oakes," she said, as if his appearance were perfectly natural, "these men were just leaving." Decker recovered quickly, his face rearranging into an oily smile. "Well now, what have we here?" "The widow's got herself a protector after all." He looked Isaac up and down. 1 man against 4 inside, plus Jenkins watching the horses. Poor odds, Cowboy. "I've played worse hands," Isaac replied evenly. "Now let the lady go and clear out." The standoff stretched, tension building like storm pressure. Isaac knew his position was precarious. 1 against 5 were indeed poor odds. But something deeper than calculation drove him now, a certainty that he couldn't ride away and leave Sophia to these vultures. The moment broke when the man holding Sophia made his move, reaching for his holstered pistol. Isaac fired first, the bullet catching the man's shoulder, spinning him away from Sophia. She immediately dropped to the floor, rolling toward her rifle as chaos erupted. Gunsmoke filled the small house as Isaac ducked behind the doorframe, exchanging fire with Decker's men. A bullet splintered wood inches from his head. From inside, he heard the distinctive crack of Sophia's rifle joining the fight. "Jenkins." "Get in here," Decker bellowed, but his call went unanswered. The lookout had either fled or fallen to Sophia's marksmanship through the window. The gunfight ended as abruptly as it began. 2 of Decker's men lay wounded on the floor. Another had retreated outside, likely to the horses. Decker himself stood with raised hands, a thin trail of blood running down his face from where a bullet had grazed his temple. "This ain't over," he snarled as Isaac relieved him of his weapon. "You think the law out here cares about some homesteader's water rights? I own the sheriff in Tucson." "Maybe so," Isaac replied calmly, "but Sheriff Morgan in Prescott is my second cousin, and he's very interested in water rights fraud. Been building cases against operations like yours for months." The bluff landed perfectly. Fear flashed across Decker's face. The man had no way of knowing Isaac hadn't spoken to any law enforcement in years, let alone claimed kinship with them. "Get your wounded and get out," Isaac continued, "and spread the word Blackburn land is protected now." Minutes later, the defeated party struggled onto their horses, supporting their injured companions. Isaac and Sophia watched from the porch, weapons still at ready until the riders disappeared into the distance. When they were truly alone, Sophia turned to Isaac, her expression unreadable. "You came back." "Saw their tracks heading this way," he explained, suddenly awkward. "Couldn't just ride on." But you will now. It wasn't a question. Isaac holstered his revolver, buying time as he wrestled with the truth that had been clarifying with each passing day. The gunfight had merely crystallized what he already knew, that his place was here, had been since he collapsed at Sophia's door. "No," he said finally. "I don't think I will unless you want me to." Sophia studied him, wariness battling with hope in her eyes. "Why, what changed?" Everything he wanted to say, but words had never been his strong suit. Instead, Isaac gestured to the homestead around them, the garden they'd expanded together, the repaired roof, the corral where Brutus now shared space with Sophia's mare. "My father told me the frontier takes everything you love," he said slowly. "Made me believe a man out west can't afford attachments, but I was wrong, Sophia. The frontier doesn't just take, it gives too if you're brave enough to claim it." He stepped closer, encouraged when she didn't retreat. "I've spent years drifting, telling myself that was freedom. But watching you fight for this place, seeing what you've built alone, I've never known anyone so free, or so brave." Sophia's composure finally cracked, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Are you saying you want to stay? For how long?" "For good," Isaac answered, the words both terrifying and liberating. "If you'll have me." "As what?" she pressed. "A hired hand?" "A partner." Isaac took her hands in his, calloused palms meeting equally work-hardened fingers. "As whatever you'll accept, a partner in this homestead at least to start. And maybe, someday, something more." The tears spilled over then, tracking clean lines down Sophia's dust-streaked cheeks. "Isaac Oakes, for a man of few words, you certainly know how to deliver them when it counts." She closed the remaining distance between them, her head fitting perfectly beneath his chin as he wrapped his arms around her. The desert stretched endless around them, harsh and beautiful and full of possibility. "We should probably repair that window before sunset," Sophia murmured against his chest, practical even in this moment of transformation. Isaac laughed, the sound startling in its unfamiliarity. When had he last truly laughed? "Yes, ma'am, whatever the lady wants." The seasons turned, each bringing its own challenges and rewards. Spring saw them expanding the homestead, adding rooms as their relationship deepened from cautious partnership to something neither could deny was love. Summer brought a trip to Prescott, where they were married by a justice of the peace with Isaac's trail boss, found through persistent inquiries, standing witness. Autumn arrived with news that Decker had indeed been arrested for land fraud, though by federal marshals rather than Isaac's fictional cousin. And with winter came the completion of their expanded home, including a nursery that would soon be needed, judging by the gentle swell of Sophia's belly. On the first anniversary of Isaac's return to the homestead, they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the desert in impossible colors. Sophia's head rested on his shoulder, her wheat gold hair now streaked with copper highlights from constant sun exposure. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The open trail, different horizons every day." Isaac considered the question seriously, his hand absently tracing circles on her rounded stomach where their child grew. "Not the way I thought I would," he admitted. "There's adventure enough right here." The desert wind carried the scent of rain, another gift from this land that had taken so much but given back even more. In the distance, their small herd of cattle grazed contentedly, the beginning of what Isaac hoped would become a prosperous ranch for their growing family. "My father was wrong," Isaac said softly. "The frontier doesn't take everything you love. It just asks if what you love is worth fighting for." He pressed a gentle kiss to Sophia's forehead. "And you are Sophia Oakes every single day." As darkness settled around their home, their true home, built with shared labor and defended together, Isaac reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. Lost in the desert, he had indeed found more than water. He had found the one thing he never knew he was searching for, not just love, but a place to belong, a horizon worth staying for, and a woman strong enough to show him that the greatest freedom came not from constant movement, but from the courage to stand still and build something that would last.